Hi, everyone. Welcome to Manufacturers Managing Remote. I'm Kiera. This is my co-founder, Matt.
Hello, everyone.
And we have a company called Circleview, where we help manufacturing managers effectively lead remote teams. And that's why we do this. We kind of like it. So today we are actually interviewing Alexis. Alexis is the author of Leading Remote Teams. She has an awesome book available on Amazon. You guys can check out the link to her book in the comments. But today it's all about her. You want to greet everyone, Alexis?
Hey, everybody. I'm excited to chat with you guys today. Remote work is something that is definitely taking off, and more people are finding out that it works well with their life. And as the pandemic is kind of winding up, winding down, we're not really sure where it's going to go. Definitely offers a lot of opportunity for everybody.
Yeah, definitely.
So, Alexis, can you maybe start with, so you wrote a book. You wrote a book about leading remote teams, which means probably that you feel strongly about it, or, so I just wanted to ask you what drove you to write the book and why, why you wanted to put that out there.
Yeah, so a little bit of a backstory. So I work for the Department of Defense. I'm a program manager and kind of manage the execution of different weapon system programs and sustainment and all the contracts that need to happen with those. So a little bit of disclaimer at the beginning, anything I say is my own personal opinion and not the views of the U.S. Air Force, the Department of Defense, or the U.S. government. So all my personal opinion, nothing official. And at the beginning, so actually before the pandemic even started, a lot of my coworkers, I worked with a lot of federal civilians, and they were all allowed to telework 1 day every 2 weeks. So they were kind of utilizing the telework, the benefits of working from home, and we worked that into our team practices. So we utilized like the digital tools. If somebody was teleworking on a day that we had our team meeting, we would still be able to bring them in the loop, even though they weren't in the office. So we kind of practice that, even though it wasn't super common in the government at the time. A lot of people were very locked into the in-person model, so to say. And so we started working that in. And then when the pandemic happened and they were like, okay, you guys are equipped with telework laptops and all your capabilities, go home and just keep doing your job from home. So I was leading a team of 9 people at the time. And I was like, okay, we just got to keep rolling with what we've been doing. And a few months in, I didn't really think anything of it at the time, but after a couple months, one of my team members serves multiple teams at the same time. And he said, hey, do you know that you're the only person that's still holding team meetings and still going forward and hasn't just like put everything on hold? And I was like, you got to be kidding me. Nobody else is continuing to operate as normal. And I said, no, they're all just waiting until we go back into the office. And at that point, 2 months in, it was pretty clear that it was going to be a while before we went back into the office.
2 months? Whoa.
Now we're over 2 years, or not 2 years, but, a year and a half in, and it's pretty clear, like, we're not really sure what the future is going to look like from here. So it's obviously been a while, and we can't afford to just stop all operations for that long. That's completely detrimental to our mission and everything that we do. So my idea at that point was, okay, maybe we can do some training. And I did like a few slides and everything on how to keep operating, how to use the digital tools that we have available to us as government employees, and how to keep things rolling, how to engage your team even though you're not in the office together. And that training led to some more training and a few more speaking requests in different organizations. And I had also always wanted to write a book. I'm a really avid reader. So I was like, you know what? I think this is my topic. I'm going to write a book about this. So I did a lot of research on how to write your own book. And long story short, in about 3 months, I went from, hey, I'm going to write a book about this after I had tested the idea through a few speaking engagements and trainings into an actual published book on Amazon. So that was definitely a cool experience, steep learning curve along the way. There's a lot of things that you don't really think about when you're writing a book, like the cover design and the launch team and the marketing, and all of that was very interesting. So very cool experience. And yeah, that's a little bit of why I wrote it.
Awesome.
Wow. So that transition must have been a little difficult. It seems like you like the transition to, oh, okay, well, I'm gonna have to continue moving forward with work during this pandemic. What was that like for you, and what was the pushback like? You actually mentioned it in your book, that seasoned workers pushed back a little bit. So
Yes.
I'd love to know more about that.
Right. So in the government, I am definitely the youngest in my organization by quite a bit. As active duty, we tend to be a little bit younger than the civilian population. And I was one of maybe two millennials on my team. We had a new engineer that came in at the time, and he was a little bit younger as well. And then there's a whole bunch of different or generations, right? We have a little bit of the baby boomers still in there, and then a lot of Gen X, and they're maybe not as comfortable with the technology, particularly in the government. We're not known for adapting technology really quickly, especially when it comes to different computer applications and using that. We tend to lag behind a little bit. And we had actually just gotten Microsoft Teams rolled out to us shortly before the pandemic started. So that was like our new collaboration software, and has actually turned out to be really useful. But one of our engineers, the older guy, he didn't have a laptop at all. He was like very paper-based, didn't know how to like start a video call or use any of that stuff. So that was a really interesting learning curve. And I actually had to like sit down with several people and teach them, this is how you log in. We use a VPN. So this is how you set up your VPN when you're working from home, get connected to the Wi-Fi. And it was very like, we have to walk through all these things, because he just pretty much knew the basics of like, okay, my computer's at my desk, log in, access files, email, do those kind of basic things, but didn't really understand so much of like the conference calls and different things like that, just because he hadn't had to use them up until that point. So a little bit of a steep learning curve there as well. But I think having me that's more native in the digital technology and using these tools, being able to sit down and explain that to them in person, whereas like our IT department was pretty slammed at the time. They were very busy trying to get everybody set up with laptops and that kind of thing. They didn't have the time to sit down one-on-one and explain things. So that was really helpful, I think. But then like that was just kind of one example in case of that. But there was a lot of people in our unit that were like that didn't have younger people on their teams to help explain things to them. So I think that was kind of a lot of the resistance to adapting the digital tools and learning to operate in that remote work environment. They were just kind of waiting until we went back in and they could see their paper files.
Did you do that remotely, or were you having to go to them and kind of do that in person? How did you manage that?
So that initial one was in person, yes. I was actually part of the augmenting the IT department, and I'm not like super computer savvy other than like the user interface, but I did help them get some laptops out to people and get everybody set up with their accounts. So at that point, yeah, he had never done telework before, even though it was available. Some people that just chose not to.
Yeah.
So yeah, getting all those basic, this is how you log in, this is how you get your network set up, that kind of stuff was definitely new.
Yeah, I've found if you know just enough, then you're kind of going to get dumped on with the IT, and I've found that throughout my career too. So I've never been in IT, but had to kind of put that hat on, or sometimes we call it OT, operational technology, but I can empathize with that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So question that I'm not sure if I got this clearly from the book or not, but did you have a position change during COVID?
Yes, I did.
That's crazy.
And that was also part of the impetus behind the book, was because I got to see two different organizations and how they were adapting to the remote work environment, not really being used to it. So yeah, my first position in supply chain was I worked there through June, so about 3 months into the pandemic. And then I actually switched to a new position. In the military, usually we switch jobs every about 2 years just to get that breadth of experience and see different roles and learn different things. And I switched over to a program management office, and I literally saw my supervisor one time, and that was to get my laptop and say, hi, this is me, and here's your laptop. Please go home now and do everything via email and telework. So that was really interesting. But then I also got to see the perspective of how different teams operated. So one thing I talked about in the book a lot that I actually got from my new team was the weekly stand-up meeting. At first, I really, really hated it because I didn't know what was going on at the time, but it was actually a really good way to bring on a new person and bring them into the team, get them up to speed on what's going on. These are our priorities. This is what's going on each day this week. These are the taskers that we need to respond to and the big picture items that we're working on. And then everybody got to say, what they're focusing on for the week. So it really helped keep everybody, gainfully employed and make sure that we're moving forward and making the best use of our time for sure. So that was kind of a cool thing that I got to pull out of the new team. And then also just to see, how they onboarded people, how the supervisors interacted, how the commanders interacted in the company or the organizational leadership, brought on the new people, assimilated them, got to know them, all that type of stuff, and then learning the new jobs as well.
So how was that for them? I mean, I'm not sure if you were able to kind of get an insider look, but how was that for them, just bringing on the new people from a remote location?
So I think for them it was a little bit frustrating because they couldn't just get to know you in person. And it was kind of weird because if you don't get to meet somebody in person for the first time and kind of get to know their mannerisms and how they talk, where they use sarcasm is a big one, especially for remote work. If you're not seeing each other all the time, you don't really get that context that you would get in the office or in person. So that getting to know people is a little bit of a steep curve. You really have to be intentional about, okay, what are your interests? What are your goals? How do you operate? What are some of your work values? And, do you stay late or get on early? What's your response time to email? Just all those little things that you don't really get to know until you've worked with somebody for a while. So I think that was pretty interesting for their perspective. And then not really knowing, other than what my previous boss had told them, what they were getting as far as a new hire. And then training is a little bit more complicated, right? So one example on my new team was training. We had another gentleman that joined at the time that was completely new to the government, and I had a little bit of experience on government contracting documents and the processes that go along with that. And we stood up a new initiative a little while after I had joined, and we were kind of slammed for work trying to get all these different documents lined up and delegate out the tasks to different people. And this gentleman was like, I want to help. I have lots of time to help, but I have no clue what I'm doing. And my other partner that was helping me at the time was like, I have too much to do. I don't have time to explain it. And I was like, okay, well, we're not going to get any help on this unless we take time to teach them and explain it. So going through that training, instead of being like, okay, stand over my shoulder while I do this, it was like all right, so we're going to get on a call. I'm going to explain the intent and all the things that we need to know to do this, the inputs and the information that goes into it. And then you can take this template and go try it out and then come back to me and we'll look it over and talk about, what you could do better and the changes that we need to make from there. And then that was kind of a learning process for him where he's going to be able to actually take that and go do it the next time.
So one of the things I think about too, when you're starting to do that and you're getting into that process, you're thinking okay, I should make some sort of a document or do this so that the next person that comes along, right, we can have this remote or easier way to onboard them. But often it kind of just falls by the wayside because you're on to your next task or whatever. But were you able to use any of those learnings to kind of change the program a little bit?
So I don't know that we really changed our onboarding process very much. We haven't brought any new people on since then.
Sure.
But that's a good idea because I know we're going to have some turnover later this year. So definitely something to keep in mind. One thing that we did work on, and that's been kind of my project for most of this year, is an ordering guide. So we have a program that's got like a long-term contract, and then we place orders every year off of it. So, and each time we do that contract, there are probably 20 plus documents that need to be redone, rerouted, re-signed by pretty high levels. So that's kind of a confusing process because most people don't have like a checklist of what to do because defense acquisition is so tailored to the specific situation. So what I've actually been working on is an ordering guide that lays out the processes, you know, start with this, and then walks you through the steps of what documents you have to get ready, how far out you have to start, and who you need to go to, what levels you need things signed at, that type of thing. So that'll be really good for future program continuity as people turn over and get promoted, and as people move on to the next thing and new people come in.
Yeah, that's an idea that we've batted around quite a bit with Circleview is onboarding and how to. Again, it's a little tough because every company is different. It's going to be tailored to even locations at the same company, different locations. But if you think about having just like a straightforward checklist or something, some sort of a flow pattern that you can walk through for onboarding, it really kind of eases the burden on everyone else because they're not having to like constantly figure out, okay, did they learn this? Did they, and there's not, you kind of have to go through your memory and like, what do they need to remember or what do they need to learn, all those sort of things. So, and then being able to do that remotely, I think would be huge for a lot of companies.
Sure. Yeah, I think having some kind of standardized, like what your first week or first couple of weeks looks like, even your first month, and have the first week be like your initial kind of HR welcome to the company. This is how we operate, getting your pay and all that other stuff set up if it wasn't done beforehand. And like templates on, Monday you're going to meet with your supervisor, and then, who are the other people that you're going to meet within the company and the leadership to welcome you and bring you into the team, and meeting your team members as well. And then as you go forward in that month, maybe have different plans based on what your role is in the company. If you're a project manager or an engineer or something like that.
Right.
Having those functional areas teach you how the business operates, what you're going to be expected to do, all those types of things, and kind of have like, I think definitely the first week, and then kind of having an outline of what the first month, what you want them to know by the time they've reached the first 30-day mark, and then even in 60 and 90 days,
right,
assimilate into the company.
Yeah, and you can have measurable goals, like do they need to know this by this amount of time, and you can measure if there's a way of measuring. Sometimes there isn't, but then you can see, if somebody's on track or not, and then do you need to adjust resources to help out with that. So yeah.
Right. Definitely think the onboarding, I mean, while the employee and their initiative and interest has a big part to do with it, onboarding is definitely on the company, because as a new employee, you don't necessarily know, unless you've had involvement with that company before, exactly what to expect or what you should be learning. It's on the company to put those unknowns in front of them.
So I have a question about how you view remote work. In your book, you said high performing, and I think you said it multiple times. So I just really want to know what aspects of remote work do you see as high performing, and just your perspective. I'd love to hear.
Absolutely. So I think that probably came from the cultural perception of remote work that seemed to be pretty pervasive in the government and just in general before the pandemic. And a lot of people were like, oh, well, you don't really do any work when you're at home. That's just kind of like when you're lazy, making sure that you check your email once in a while. And that's not the case. A lot of us have found that we're actually more productive when we're at home and when we can focus and not have all those in the office distractions. Because when you think about it, when you were in the office, you might check your email for a little while, work on something, and then your coworker stops by to talk about their weekend. Well, there went 45 minutes, so I definitely wanted to change that cultural perception, because you're not just sitting at home in your pajamas, you can actually get a lot done. So I like to talk about, the collaboration aspects and how to actually get things done versus just taking that more passive approach and waiting for time to just pass by and maybe do one or two things and knock a couple things off your list. When you can get a high performing team, you're actually focused on moving towards your organization's goals together and then knocking out the tasks that need to happen to get that done, so that you're using your time wisely and getting those things knocked out, getting those things done, and being able to work with each other. So if your tasks that you're working on are interdependent between multiple people, that you're coordinating with them and they're working with you, and their time is also coordinated with what you're doing as you're doing it.
So productivity, what are some methods or tips that you would give for staying on task and remaining productive?
So one of the most important things for productivity, I think, is making sure that you're focusing on the things that are actually going to matter and move the needle forward for your role and what you're supposed to be contributing to your organization. So, for example, some of the things that I've been working on recently weren't necessarily like a high priority project, they weren't urgent. They were high priority, but they weren't urgent. So it was easy for some of the leaders on our team to be like, oh, well, we can do that later. It doesn't have to be done right now. But really, when you're talking about a big document like the risk management plan that really takes a proactive look at how we do things, redoing that and making sure that we focus on what are our risks and are we allocating our resources in the right areas to mitigate some of those risks and prevent a disaster from happening. Those are actually really important and should be a higher priority. So blocking off the time and saying, so I do mine like mostly on a weekly basis. I'll say, what are my priorities for this week? What are the big things that I want to get done? And I plan those out, and then I plan the more urgent things around those and the lower priority things. So I'm making sure that I spend a chunk of time on the high priority things and get those tasks done first, and then look at some of the different things like catching up on email or doing training that maybe doesn't have to be done right away, those type of things. And one thing I like to do with this is time blocking. So I'll say, in this next 2 hours, I need to get this done. And I try to allot the amount of time that it actually takes to get that done without shorting yourself too much. So you're going to be super stressed, but also don't give yourself too much time. Because I've personally found when I allow myself too much time, it's really easy to, kind of get distracted and go down a side hole or pull up my phone and look at Facebook or whatever. That's a black hole. Don't do that. If you find yourself doing that, I try to put my phone like on the opposite side of my desk behind my computer, so I still can hear it if it rings, but I'm not like tempted to just touch it and start checking apps.
So you talked about kind of like setting out your tasks for the week. And to me, that kind of goes a lot or hand in hand with you're talking about your weekly stand-ups. So I work right now, we do in an organization, we do daily stand-ups. And what I love about it is it's really simple, and it's kind of like you should be doing it anyway, but it forces you to think about, what am I going to work on today? And why is that the most important thing? And then you, in your stand-up, you talk through that. So I think, is that kind of how you use your weekly stand-ups to help you prioritize as well?
Absolutely, yeah. And it just depends on like the pace of how your organization's going. Sometimes weekly works good. Sometimes daily is needed, especially when you're in like a rapid development type stage. I think it's good for you to focus on what's important for you and for you to actually identify that, because if you don't have that stand-up, you're not actually identifying that and it's more of a passive thing. It's less proactive and intentional. I think remote work is a lot about intentionality when it comes to what you're going to focus on for the week, and also connecting with other people. It takes more intention as well.
Right. So one of the things that we try to do, or we're trying to do with Circleview, is aligning everyone, right? So what are and you talked about it already, the stuff that I'm doing today or I plan to do, how does it fit into what we're doing? How does it fit into our goals? And is it the right thing to be working on? And then if you have those meetings like you're talking about, whether it's weekly, daily, whatever, you bring that up in front of the team and you say, this is what I'm doing. And that gives everyone an opportunity to say, yep, okay, that seems like the right thing. Or, oh, well, what about this other item? And if you have like a board, we use task boards or whatever to show, what are all the priorities. We have a backlog, things like that. So if you're used to Agile, and then you can use all of those tools, get them up in front of everyone's eyes, and then it just really helps with that alignment, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's good also to get what you're doing in front of your teammates so that they can kind of check you, as you said, and see, is this the most important thing for you to be doing, or am I waiting on you to get something done for me before, and then my time is just waiting and that's on hold. So then you're wasting another person's time. So I like to think of myself as like removing the bottleneck. Is there anything that is sitting in my inbox that I need to do that's a bottleneck on somebody else's time? That's kind of a good way with the stand-ups to see, is there something that you need to do first, and help rearrange your priorities that way too.
I know something that people often have a hard time doing is just starting. So you've mentioned the stand-up meetings a couple of times, and just what would you suggest is the best way to organize a stand-up meeting, whether that be daily or monthly? Just what's the best order? What are the priorities of the meeting? What do you suggest?
So I think this is kind of dependent on the organization and what's all involved in their operations. So it's going to be different. What we do is we usually have like a weekly overview of the schedule. So like, what are the big meetings that we have going on during the week and who's covering what? And that can kind of help us, if one person is on leave or on vacation or has another meeting, or if there's two meetings at the same time, we can kind of talk about it at a leadership level on the team and see who's going to cover this one, who's going to cover that one, just to make sure that all of our bases are covered. We also do an overview, kind of like with people being on leave or out of the office. Is there, what is the resource availability? Who is going to be gone? Who's going to be in training? Who's actually going to be available and actively working during the week? And then we also have our priorities and our taskers. So things that are due during that week, or even the following week, things that we need to start working on, and the big picture priorities that we want to start making progress on. So that it's kind of like a dashboard that we do. Usually it's in kind of an email that gets sent out beforehand. And that way everybody can see exactly what's going on, what's due, what are the things we need to check in on, and that type of thing. So really, I think a weekly is a pretty good starting point. If somebody's like never done this on their team before, weekly is a good starting point. If they find that there's more things happening in the week that they didn't put on the Monday stand-up, it might be good to move to daily if it's just like a quick 5-minute meeting. And if things are really rapidly happening, that would probably be a good idea for a daily. I think monthly is a little bit too far out to really be intentional and be productive, because monthly is a pretty broad time scale.
Yeah, guys, I hope you're writing this down if you if you need tips on what to do. I think that was pretty solid. So, I am monitoring the comments and I see that someone has a question. So they asked, is Circleview fully remote? Richard asked if Circleview is fully remote. Yes, we are. We're fully remote. We're a software company, so it's a little easier for us to be fully remote. But yeah, we definitely are. Guys, if you have any other questions, please leave them in the comments, because we love to make sure that we address them. What I had a question about tools. So what tools do you think help you guys remain on task, remain productive, and maybe some good suggestions that you could offer people?
So I think I just lightly mentioned it before, but time blocking is one of my favorite tools to like stay productive, and then allotting that just enough time, not too much, not too little, to get your tasks done when you prioritize them that way. For collaboration, we use Microsoft Teams. It's just one of the many tools. I know a lot of people use Slack and Zoom. For me, I'm a little bit limited to what's approved for use on government systems. So a little bit bigger hurdle than some of the other companies out there. But I know for different efforts, I've also used Slack and some of the other projects out there. I'm trying to think.
So let me just ask, when you're blocking out your time, or you're kind of estimating your time, are you doing that day to day? Are you saying, okay, today I'm doing like these 3 things, this one's going to take 1 hour, this is going to take 2 hours, and then kind of planning out that way? Or are you doing it more broadly? Can you maybe give specifics on that?
So I usually do that every day, and then I usually kind of readjust at lunchtime because it never really goes exactly as I planned. And so in the morning, usually when I sit down, I look at like my calendar. So what are the meetings that I have today? And then what are the different chunks of time in between meetings? Because I think it's really easy if you only have 30 minutes or if you have an hour between meetings, it's really easy for that time to just slip away and you don't know what happened. So I like to write down, okay, I have this meeting from 8 to 9, and then I have from 9 to 10, I'm going to work on this task and try to get that done. And then, from 10 to 11, I have a different meeting, or however it tends to fall out for that day. Or I might have a list of smaller things that if this meeting gets done 20 minutes early, then I can jump into my email and knock out these couple things that I have to send. So I kind of block things out like that. And then, as it always happens, usually by lunchtime, some things have shifted. Maybe something took a little bit longer or got interrupted and I didn't get to finish it in the first time block. Then in the afternoon, I'll kind of readjust and say, okay, what are the things that I definitely need to get done before I log off today?
Makes a lot of sense. No, and that's great, especially because that I really empathize, I guess, with the in between the meetings, because you'd be like, oh, I have a half hour, I'll just check email, which isn't always like, you need to do it, but it's not always the best time to do it. I know certain people will only check email during certain times of the day. It's like, okay, only at the beginning of the day or the end of the day or whatever, or block that off too. And I think that's another good potential tactic.
Yeah, so actually on email, one trick that I did this year that has really changed me being able to actually focus on what I'm doing rather than getting distracted by email is, so we have Outlook, and Outlook sends you that beautiful pop-up notification at the corner of your screen every time you get a new email. And only about half the emails that I actually get on a regular basis do I need to read and look at in a timely manner and respond. So those notifications are really distracting. And when you get distracted, it can take on average 25 minutes to get refocused on what you're doing. So if you only have an hour time block and you get distracted once, you're like, it kind of cuts out like half of your time. So I actually went into the settings, and you can turn off the pop-up notifications, and you can also turn off the little icon at the bottom of your screen that shows that you have mail.
Ooh.
So that you're not, because I'm like an inbox zero type of person. It
Me
bugs
too.
the crap out of me if I have unread emails. So I changed it so that I can't see that I have new emails until I actually go back into the app. And I can leave it open during this time so I don't have to restart it every time. But it won't like pop up and distract me from doing my work. So that's changed a lot. And now I get to the point where I'll get into what I'm doing, get really deep into something for 20, 30 minutes, get it done. And then I'm not even thinking about email. Then I'm like, okay, I'm done with this. Go back, open Outlook. Oh, excuse me.
While you do that, I think I'm gonna do that right now, because that is such a great tip.
Yeah, that has changed a lot for me as far as being able to reduce distractions, because Outlook, it does that. And half the time, the emails are just like, for your information, you didn't need to respond to it. It doesn't matter if you don't see it for 2 hours, So that's definitely helped. And then I'm like, oh, look at that. I have 3 or 4 unread emails. Oh, good. Those didn't distract me, and I actually got this thing done that I wanted to do. So definitely a good tip. No matter what, like, your boss is probably going to be fine if you don't respond for an hour or two, because realistically, if they send you an email and you're in a meeting for an hour, you're not going to respond until after you get out of that meeting anyways. So what's the difference between you being in a meeting with somebody else, or you being in a meeting with yourself, working to actually get something productive done for the company. So I think that's probably realistic. And if your boss has a problem with that, you should probably have a conversation about expectations.
Oh, that's funny. No, that's I wanted to ask, I don't know, Kiera, if you had any more questions about tools,
No, go
but
for it.
I noticed you're pursuing a degree in engineering management. And I just wanted to ask why you chose to do that.
So that one actually fit really well with my defense career field. I'm an acquisition program manager. And that's a very businessy type of thing. So I definitely wanted an MBA as a more recognized degree for my master's. And I was looking at project management because that's also really kind of the bread and butter of what I do on a day-to-day basis. But my school offered engineering management, and I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. I'm working with engineers all day, every day, because they're the, the design authority and the ultimate checks and balances on what the government wants on a technical level versus what the contractor thinks that we need. So I was like, I'll check that out. But I was actually really apprehensive because I don't have an engineering degree. I'm not a technical person. I'm business minded. So I actually got with the school and said, can you send me like a syllabus? Will I be okay if I don't have like an electrical engineering degree going into this? Will I even understand it? And I was actually really glad that I did, because it was very systems thinking at a high level, not necessarily technical and down the weeds. So it talked about like how to talk to geeks. It was really funny. Our intro to engineering management class, the textbook for it was The Geek Leader's Handbook. This is honestly one of my favorite books that I've ever read, as far as like leading technical teams and being able to talk to people who are stereotypically fairly introverted and don't like to talk to people. That was very insightful, and I found that I actually identified with about half of the stuff in there, as far as, being a little bit more introverted. This is how I like to work, that type of thing. So that's definitely a good read. And then the rest of the classes for the program are very like systems thinking at a high level. And then a lot of it also tied into the defense acquisition systems engineering life cycle, which is a lot of what I'm doing anyways through my defense acquisition university certifications as well that are required for my primary career. So it fit in really well, and looking at like weapon system architecture from a whole and the different life cycle processes that are involved with that. So it's been a pretty useful degree so far, and I actually just finished the last class for the concentration, and definitely glad that I did it.
Yeah, so I'm an engineer, chemical engineering degree, and I'm glad they told you that you didn't need that degree, because you absolutely don't need the gory technical details to know the science behind that to manage engineers. Like, you don't, as long as you can communicate and you can lead, and lead people in the right direction, then that's good enough. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think being able to know enough of the technical and being able to ask the right questions, I think
right.
has been the big thing for me. Like being able to pull out what is the technical information that's actually important and pertinent to the decisions that we're going to make at a business level, and then being that translator that can communicate what the engineer wants you to know and what you actually need to know, and then connecting that to how it impacts the decisions that the organization is going to make going forward, how that impacts your customers and that type of thing is a rare but useful skill.
It is.
Well, I have a question about this is changing the topic now, but on trust. So just being able to build trust from a remote location, I guess. How did you do that? How did you do that, especially coming into a brand new team during your transition? How did you make that adjustment? I know you've never met your team in person. Seems like
Yeah, so trust is definitely one of those things that's really hard to earn and then really easy to destroy, right? So in the book, I talk about kind of two different sides of the trust equation, likability, and then reliability. So likability is just getting to know people and being a person that people want to work with. So, you know, introducing yourself, talking a little bit, offering up some personal information, you know, what are your hobbies? What are the different things that we might be able to connect on? What's your background? What's your family life like? If you're comfortable sharing that, because that impacts your life and what you bring to the table when you're working on a remote team. So talking about, you know, that kind of stuff and being a little bit vulnerable and being able to connect with people, I think is really important to building trust. And then the reliability piece is really the piece that you have to earn. So, you know, do you do what you say you're going to do? Are you offering up to help, you know, hey, I can help you out with that, especially when you're newer, you might not have as much going on. Offering to help with different projects. You know, there was a task pretty shortly after I joined my new team that they had questions about government furnished property, and I was like, oh yeah, I used to deal with that when I was on the logistics side for the accountability that went with that. So I can help you guys look into that. It's just little things like that, and being willing to really be a team player, I think, is a big piece to the reliability. And then actually following through and completing whatever it was that you said you're going to do by a certain date. So if you agreed that you were going to get, you know, this document back to the engineer by the end of the month, send it back by that day. Or if you can't because your workload is a little too busy at the time and you had to rearrange some things, talking to them before the deadline, say, hey, I got to rearrange this. Is that okay with you? And just opening that communication, I think, is a really big deal with reliability, and people want to know that they can count on you. So those two things are really big. One thing that I did to kind of open the door to building trust when I joined the new organization is we have a lot of stakeholders in different parts of the country. And even, you know, if we were going in the office, we would still have all these stakeholders in different parts of the country. So offering up and asking first from my predecessor, who are the different people that I need to talk to and who are the people that you engage with on a regular basis? Because when you're remote, if they don't see the new person coming into the office, or they don't see the new person coming to, my office did a lot of in-person meetings and events where we would travel all over and meet the different counterparts at our different offices. And that all went to a stop with remote work. Nobody was traveling. So if you're not seeing somebody and meeting them, oh, so-and-so is the new Tom, she's replacing him on this program. They don't see you, they don't know who to reach out to when they have an issue. If nobody tells them, nobody knows who you are. And it's really easy to just, you know, sit at home on your computer and say, oh, I'm not getting any emails. Well, it's because you're supposed to be emailing. So what I did at first was I got all those names and I sent each person individually an email, and I said, hey, I'm taking over for this guy. I'm new to this program, haven't worked this weapon system at all, but these are the weapon systems that I have worked in the past, and this is kind of my background. And, you know, I have 2 dogs and I like to run on the weekends. And, you know, this is a little bit about me. I'm obviously new. I don't know what's going on yet, but I'm going to try to learn. And, you know, can you reply? Please tell me a little bit about yourself and what you were working on with my predecessor so I know what things to track. And then, you know, I'm opening the door now. So please communicate to me if you have any issues, any questions, please reach out. You know, I'm here. That single step can make all the difference between people actually wanting to reach out to you. Just opening the door and saying, hey, I'm here, I'm trying to learn. Please come to me with anything you have that's pertinent to, you know, my program. I'm the person now, so come to me with any questions you have. And then when they do email you, then you can say, okay, now I need to look into this, and then I learn a little bit more about that area. So I think that's a big deal when you're on a remote team, is like, who are the people I'm supposed to be talking to, and let me go introduce myself to them so that they know to reach out to me whenever they need me.
That is great advice. It's really great. I just can imagine the difficulty. I mean, I haven't had to go through that exact situation, but just, well, yes, I have. I've never met Matt in person.
Nope.
And I'm just friendly, so it doesn't feel like it. But yeah, just reaching out to see it, or just showing people that, hey, I am available, I am here. I think that's awesome.
Right. And then you avoid like the, oh, well, this person left and I've never heard who's replacing them? Do we even have somebody else that's supposed to be helping us? That can kind of create some negative feelings. So you definitely want to avoid that as soon as possible.
And well, let's Matt, unless you have a question on that, I kind of want to switch to future state of remote work.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So what are you foreseeing for future work? I've been, reading a ton of articles and things of what remote work will look like future state, and even toward the end of this year, just as we're seeing drastic changes. Seems like people are going back into lockdown and just all kinds of stuff. So what are your thoughts on where we're going?
Yeah, so I don't know that anybody has the crystal ball with this. It's fun to speculate and see where things might go. I think we're seeing a lot more of pressure, especially from employees in a tight labor market. A lot of employees are like, "Hey, I like this," and then when you have the health threat or danger on the other side, that's kind of paired pushing this along. I think it's definitely going to become more normal and a bigger thing as we go forward. I have a Google alert set for remote work, so I kind of get an email every morning with like, what are the new articles? What are people talking about? And I think there was a Forbes one today where like 2 years ago, I'm not sure exactly what year it was, so don't quote me on these numbers, but a couple of years ago, there was only like 7,000 jobs in the US that were remote and paid over six figures. And now they're projecting that by the end of this year, there's over 80,000 jobs that pay, fully remote over six figures. And that's probably just a small dent in it compared to how many people are actually working remotely. But I definitely think we're going to see a trend of increased adoption for this, especially as companies are starting to realize the benefits and the lower costs of allowing their employees to work remotely. I think the biggest challenge right now, or the biggest obstacle that we have to truly adopting the remote work model for everybody that realistically can, that doesn't have a lot of physical products or services, is the team collaboration and the comfort collaborating through digital medium. And I think I touched on that at the end of the book, is really the future of, can we collaborate through a digital medium and be okay with that, and can we still operate just as comfortably as we would in an office, and can we be just as creative when we're talking on a Zoom call versus when we're sitting around a table? I think that's really the biggest obstacle that I see right now, and I know like Apple was pushing back, and their biggest reason that they were citing was that the creative collaboration wasn't happening as much on our own team. So we have to be willing to get out of our own way and reach out to people and be comfortable collaborating through the digital platform, because if we're only doing that when we have to versus when we really need to be doing it on a proactive basis, then that's really going to hinder our creativity in the long run.
That is a really good point. I think in a previous interview we had, someone was talking about Lisa was talking about she's extroverted. So being around people kind of fuels her energy, and not being around people makes her sad. So it's different. It's just a different environment. I think that it's not necessarily the effort that we have to put forth for just for accepting the new normal, but I think it's just kind of putting aside your preconceived everything, just everything you thought before, and being able to transition. Maybe it's not as hard as everyone thinks.
Yeah, I definitely think you can't anchor on what the office environment was like. For extroverts, it can be a little bit different, and like wanting to actually be around people every day. So my husband's extroverted, and he's been working, on the other side of my office throughout the whole pandemic. He got a fully remote job as well. So we get to kind of interact with each other all day. So we kind of get a little bit of that. And then we're also pretty friendly with like our neighbors, and we organize different activities and stuff like that. So we kind of you have to have other outlets for your social interaction, I think, to really be successful and not feel like super cut off during remote work. So yeah, definitely have to be intentional about other social interaction as well, so that you're not only getting that from work, which I think a lot of people do or have in the past. And then I think the other underrated thing that obviously we can't do so much right now, but in a normal situation where a pandemic wasn't a big concern, is like company on-sites, where even if you do have remote workers dispersed maybe once or twice a year, the company pays for the team to get together, do collaboration activities, get to know each other, and just maybe not even focused on work, but just getting to know each other. Like in the Air Force, we call them wingman days because we're each other's wingman. And that's just kind of like a way to say, hey, we're going to get together, new team building, and it's not going to be, we're not going to have a work-based goal or an output that we need to do, other than we need to just get together, have fun with each other, learn a little bit about each other. And I think that carries over so quickly into how you work with each other as well.
So I was thinking about a lot of things when you're just talking, but like one of the things that when I interviewed Kevin, right, who's on our team now, he was talking about, you're in this remote environment and you want to catch up with someone. It's like so much more intentional, right? Versus just going, like you said, going to the cube and like asking what happened on the weekend. Now you have to at least click a button. You have to think about it beforehand, right? And type something or set up a call or whatever. And that kind of stops you. You might check you, right? So if you're in an environment where you're trying to brainstorm and things like that, and everyone's in the same room, you may have lower inhibitions. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but you might feel more comfortable just throwing out any idea versus where you're remote and you actually have to type it and you have to actually think before you're going to take yourself off mute or whatever. So I wonder if it's just kind of part of it is just getting over that hurdle maybe, and just us getting used to it. But then there's also stuff like when we're talking over Zoom or whatever Teams, you can't interrupt each other, or like the audio gets all messed up. So I don't know. I think we'll figure our way out through this because we kind of have to. But there's some things that I was thinking about that could still cause issues.
Yeah, yeah. So I actually just read another book on remote teams leading from anywhere by David Burkus, and one thing that he brought up that I thought was really interesting is kind of two sides of the coin for video versus non-video. And one was that people actually listen and catch a lot more of the nonverbal, like intonation, emotion, that type of stuff in your voice when there's not video. And people are also like way less self-conscious because they're not worried about how they look, or they don't have like, a bunch of faces staring at them. So they're more willing to express their mind and different things like that. But then also he mentioned that for brainstorming activities, like you said, in person works a lot better for that, because you can see, if somebody wants to jump in with an idea, then if you're not on video and you are on mute, then you have to turn your video on and or unmute yourself. So you're a lot less likely to jump in with an idea. So he actually said for brainstorming activities and real like high creative collaboration activities, video on and mute off for the whole time. So it's just, you can see somebody when they're ready to jump in with something, or, if you start to say something, then you can just say it rather than like, I think I want to say this. Okay, unmute. Okay, wait for a chance to talk. Oh, actually the conversation went in a different direction, so now I don't want to say it.
Yeah.
It kind of removes those barriers to collaboration that way.
Yeah, that's a good point. Just definitely on the creative part, I think that does really depend upon I don't know, you just mentioned a lot of like body language and different things like that, those different cues. And when it's time to be creative, you really just have to be able to flow. You have to feel comfortable and all of that. So those are a lot of different aspects I guess we'll have to adjust to.
Yeah, and it's you have to build trust to be able to feel comfortable doing that, right? So it kind of all like wraps back into each other. Can you trust each other? Depending on the size of your team, 5 to 15 is probably an ideal size. Any more than that gets to be just a few too many people to really truly collaborate. So having those smaller, tight-knit groups where you all, get to know each other really well and feel comfortable collaborating. And then the other thing I really like is just being able to share your screen while you're working. So maybe you don't have video on, but having your mics open and being able to share your screen and collaborate together that way, whether it's, I'm not super familiar with the software space, but if you guys are like working on something and they're coding, being able to see what they're doing, I imagine would be pretty valuable, but also like for us document writing and working on different things, being able to make the changes in real time and see what the other person's doing in real time and then give feedback that way is also a pretty useful tool, especially when you're trying to get the input of multiple different people at the same time. And just instead of having to send something out, like for some of the stuff that I do, we can send a document out to 3 different people, say, hey, I need your feedback and make these changes. And you have to then make them one at a time and everybody's doing it at their own time, or you can just get together for 30 minutes. Hey, what do we want to do? How do we want to word this? Does this sound good? Okay, done. It's way quicker that way. So measuring those asynchronous versus synchronous communications in your collaboration is also a good tool to kind of hone as you go and learning which ones should be done asynchronously on your own time, and then which ones would actually just be a lot quicker if you jumped on a call for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And I think that circles back to what you're talking about with planning, right? So your stand-up, you have something, it could be a dashboard. I think you just said it was just an email, right? So it could be as simple as just a text document that everyone looks at, but then that everyone is looking at the same thing, and then you can build off of that. So that's what, yeah.
Definitely, yeah. Sometimes it's really useful to just all be looking at the same thing at the same time.
Yep.
I love it. So what, I don't know if you pay attention to different industries, just to see how people are adjusting or who's actually adopting remote work and who isn't. But what's your thought on that?
As far as how different industries are reacting?
Yeah.
So I'm paying attention a little bit, trying to actually decide what my next move is going to be. I have a year left on active duty in the military, and then I've decided just kind of for my family that we're going to separate active duty and move into something else. And as you can probably guess, remote work is pretty important for me. So I'm trying to look at, okay, what's a career direction that's going to accommodate remote work and not like having to be in a certain location and go into the office certain days a week. For me, full-time remote work is really attractive with maybe like a little bit of travel or going to the office once in a while, but not necessarily like on a weekly established basis. So kind of looking at those different things and how the different people are reacting to it. And, on LinkedIn, some companies are like, we're full in, we're doing this, our people want it, and we're going to, you spoke, we listened, this is what's going to happen, and we're going to roll with it. And then other companies are like, nope, don't expect to be on this too much longer. We're going to try to bring you back in and mandate vaccines and all these other things, which we're not going to get into that conversation. But I definitely think the companies that are being more flexible and responding to what the labor market needs are going to be able to attract and retain the higher talent, because we're seeing a lot of surveys right now where people are willing to give up other benefits to be able to continue working remotely, particularly in like parents who that's really important to them, is to be able to be there for their kids and have that flexibility. And a lot of women that we see as they become parents and as they age and their kids age, they decide to take a step out of the workforce. So this is an opportunity to retain those women and that talent into higher leadership positions and really see that diversity up through the ranks in different companies too.
Yeah. We one thing that we focus on is our theory, actually, or one of them behind Circleview, is that we help with employee retention. Just the flexibility aspect of being able to work from home is just kind of here to stay. I think everyone's gotten a taste of it, and they're just not willing to let it go. I read probably a similar article that you did that said people are even willing to accept a 10% decrease in wage to be able to work. Now that's a big deal.
Yeah, that's a
We,
lot.
we like our money.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So just to be able to work from home. So definitely I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I don't think that companies that are having that resistance will last very long. I don't know, you know, unless they're paying a lot, unless they they increase a lot and they balance it out with benefits. I'm not sure how long they'd be able
Yeah,
to
but
last.
I think people our age and younger, it's money is not everything. Like we know that, right? And we're looking for different things in life, So obviously we want enough money to pay the bills, but if flexibility in work is an option, we're going to take it because it just makes personally it just makes my life so much better. So that's
Yeah.
I feel pretty strongly about that too, but yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think especially like the flexibility and the talent retention aspect, like as you grow and progress as a person and you go through life, a career could be 30 to 40 years of your life. So you're going to change a lot and your needs as a person are going to change a lot. So if the company wants to keep you around and help foster your growth throughout, your career life cycle, they need to be a little bit flexible at times when your life can't necessarily be focused solely around work. There's going to be times where, maybe your family or your hobbies or different things, some of the dreams that you want to work on take a front seat, and then work needs to take a little bit of a back seat. So I think having that flexibility to flex and adjust, maybe even offering, hey, do you need to scale back your hours and do a part-time position for a little while you focus on something else, but you still need that income, you still want to stick with us and keep working on what you've been doing because you have a lot of valuable skills and experience that we can still use in the company. And then being able to later, once that part of your life is kind of cooled off or not as important to you, then you can scale back up and say, okay, I want to take on more of a leadership role, or I want to, do more of the company now. I think that flexibility is going to go a lot farther than most people can see right now.
Right. So it's 5:00. This conversation has been awesome.
Went fast.
Yeah, it did. But if you had to leave, final nuggets, if you'd like to, maybe some tips or something that you'd like to give, what would those be?
Oh, pressure. We covered a lot of it today. So I think the biggest thing to take away is instead of saying, we can't do that, how can we reframe the question into how can we do that? So especially when it comes to the creativity, the collaboration, being productive, stay, how can I be more productive, or how can I collaborate and build that trust and that comfort communicating through the digital medium with my team better. I think if you take that approach through all the different problems that you might be encountering or the different challenges and obstacles to remote work, I think people will definitely find a better way to do things as we move forward.
Great tip. And how can people reach you if they want to contact you, or if they want to get that great book that just so happens to be on sale on Amazon? I noticed.
Yeah. So like you said, Amazon for the book, Leading Remote Teams, Embrace the Future of Remote Work Culture is the title. We have paperback, audiobook, and Kindle versions. So go to Amazon to find that. And then if you want to connect with me, LinkedIn is the best place. I'm pretty active on there, usually every day or at least several times a week. So LinkedIn is a good place to get in touch with me.
And say your name one more time.
Oh,
just
sorry,
so they can find you.
Alexis Gerst. Yeah, ALEXISGERST.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. We look forward to our next event.